Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Ben, and today I'm going to be teaching you your first programming lesson in C++. Alright, so before we get started into this tutorial is mainly aimed at people who are completely new to programming. They've never touched a programming or piece of code in their life, and they're looking to get started. They want to get their feet wet, they want to see what it has to offer, what's out there, what they can do, right? It's also targeted at people who have maybe worked with Scratch before, have a little bit of the knowledge of the concepts behind programming, but they're kind of bored of just sticking together blocks of code and want to get into actually writing the code themselves. So, without further ado, let's get started. We're going to be working on a website called Replit.com. So if you go ahead and Google Replit, it will be brought up right here. And when you click this page, you'll probably be prompted with a login first. Go ahead, log in with your information. You could use a Google account, GitHub account, log in with your email address and password if that's more of your thing. Anything like that. I'm not going to go over that because I'm assuming you guys know how to take care of that. But once you log in, you should be greeted with a page that looks something like this. Now there's a lot of cool stuff on Replit. There's a learn section, there's a trending section. It's kind of like a little bit of a social media in a sense, where you could see other projects that people are working on, and you could even learn some new stuff on your own. But for this tutorial, we're mainly worried about this create section, right? So over here on the left hand side, there's a little pop-out menu that you go to, and you'll see here a plus new REPL, or a little plus down here. You go ahead, click either one of those, and you'll be greeted with a window that looks something like this. Now in this window, you need to go ahead and click what kind of language you want to be writing in, which is going to be C++ for our tutorial, and we're going to need a name for our REPL, or project. REPL, project, they'll be used interchangeably, but just know for this tutorial, they mean the same thing. So let's go ahead and name our project our first program. Okay, and then hit create REPL. Also, while this is loading, I just want to bring up a bit of a point of why I'm using Replit for this tutorial, and it's basically to reduce any confusion that may come up with the whole process of downloading and setting up all the stuff in order to start writing your own code. I think this makes it a lot easier, plus it comes with some pretty cool features that we could use. Everything's going to be stored in the cloud, and everything runs in the cloud. So you don't need to have a good computer, and you don't need to worry about where your programs are. They're all going to be saved up in the cloud, so as long as you have a web connection and an account, which you all should have by now since you registered, you'll always have a place that you can access your programs from. So if maybe you're switching computers, your files will all still be there. Alright, so with that point out of the way, let's get into what is going on this screen. So, you're going to see on the left over here, we have a Files tab, we have the main.cpp in the middle here, and we have a console over here. Alright, so we're going to kind of just focus in on a couple things here. So in the Files tab over here, we don't actually have to worry about anything here, since we're only going to be dealing with one file right now. In our example, this is going to be a class. I'm not going to explain too much about what classes are. We'll get more into that when we start getting into objects and stuff like that. But just understand it's basically where the code is contained. Alright, so if we go ahead and get into this class, we're in the main.cpp class. Alright, for C++, this is where all your programs are going to start. They all start in the main file, and then they go ahead and sometimes they'll go to other classes to get information, and sometimes, for our example, they'll just stay in the main class. Alright, and the console over here, this just shows the output of what our code does. So if we go ahead and run the example that they gave us, we will see .main, that's just the file that we have up here, and then we see hello world. Okay, cool. So some text was printed out on the screen. You might also see over here, you now see this main thing. If you go ahead and click on that, a lot of mumbo jumbo pretty much appears. So we don't have to worry about this too much. This is basically the equivalent of the .exe file that would be pushed out with this. Like I said, don't worry too much about that. We won't be getting into that, at least not in this episode. Let's worry more about the contents of this program. So, as we can see up top, we have hashtag include IOStream. What this basically is a library that more or less teaches the computer what certain commands are going to do. This one in particular is the IOStream, which basically just deals with input and outputting stuff. There are a lot of other libraries in C++ that we'll get into in future episodes. But I think for right now, as long as you understand that this is necessary for commands like cout to run, then I think you should be good. Getting into this, we now see int main open bracket. This int part here, once again, don't have to worry about this. You'll notice this is kind of a recurring theme throughout this tutorial, is this whole level of abstraction. Basically what that means is, take a car for example. You can understand how to drive a car. You could use the steering wheel, you could hit the gas pedal, you could hit the brake, but the thing is you don't have to know how the engine works in order to accomplish that. Okay? So that is exactly what we're doing here. We don't have to understand what int is actually doing or what's going on outside of this class. We just know that when the program starts, it goes in and then starts reading from here. Okay? So now we have open bracket, close bracket down here. This is important. Make sure that the code that you're writing is contained inside these brackets. Notice how something like a library is included outside of those brackets because the computer needs to know what books, in this example, it needs to grab before it even starts running this program. Okay? So inside here, I'm going to delete the statement that they include and we're going to write it from scratch. I know this is such a huge program that we're writing from scratch. Alright, so if we want to print something to the screen, what do we have to do? Well, we have to type std : cout. What this is, or what's important here to check, is the fact that we have this std : This is basically what I will pretty much refer to as a prefix, so the computer knows where to grab this information from. std is kind of like the standard library of C++, to my understanding. You don't really need to worry about this too much. Just make sure that you're putting it before certain commands, such as cout. Then we're going to go ahead and throw two less than signs, also known as a chevron, if you want to use the fancy terms. We'll throw down some quotation marks because we need to encase in quotation marks what we want to print to the screen. So in our example, we're going to say, I am learning C++. Alright, and that's going to be our first line. And then we're going to go ahead and throw a semicolon after that. Alright, and that tells the computer, hey, that's all we're doing on this line. Go ahead, start reading the next instruction. Because when a program is being ran, a computer is basically going line by line by line, reading what is written on that line, doing that, and then bumping down to the next line. So this semicolon right here is really important because that tells the computer where the next line starts. Okay. So if we go ahead and run this one now, we will see printed to the screen, I am learning C++. Cool. That's what we intended it to print. All right. Let's go ahead and try adding another printout statement. Okay. If we go ahead and let's say I am a self-taught programmer, because that is what all you guys are now that you're taking the time to learn programming on your own. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we run this now. Alright, well, we see I am learning C++ and I'm a self-taught programmer, but it's all on the same line. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably not what you were expecting. You know, shouldn't have bumped down to the next line. The thing is, though, is the computer does not understand at least on its own, where we want the next line to start being printed out. We have to tell it where to do that. So we're going to go ahead and do just that. We can add another chevron after I am learning C++, and we could type std : end L. And what this says is end line. Okay, so once we hit this point, we're going to end the line and we're going to start doing whatever that is that we're doing next on the next line. Okay, so if we run this now, we see I am learning C++, and then I am a self-taught programmer is bumped down to the next line. Great. Now, there's another alternative to this that I think looks a little bit more pretty, and that is a \n. Now remember, this isn't the / that you normally see in websites. This is a \. It's located somewhere over on the right side of your keyboard. And we're going to put an N afterwards. This is kind of a special command. So when the computer is reading this information, it gets up to this, it gets to this \, and it goes, whoa, hold up, we're not printing this as normal. We have to do something special. And it looks to see what's after it. In our example here, we see that there's an N after it. So it knows, all right, we're going to do a new line. And if we go ahead and run that, same result, it gets bumped down to the next line. Awesome. Now, that's pretty much it for our first programming lesson. But I don't think a lesson would be complete without some homework, just to help reinforce what is going on here. Now, for you, I have a nice simple homework setup that I think you might like. All right, if you've never heard of it, there's something called ASCII art. And basically what it is it's these cool pictures that are drawn entirely out of characters. All right, pretty cool. And how about that? In our program, we're printing characters, or basically the letters and symbols on our keyboard. Sometimes numbers too, but take that with a grain of salt. So if we go ahead and you can check out, there's a bunch of cool websites out there that have ASCII art. You go ahead and find one, you go ahead, copy this, and then throw it into your program. Now, I'm not going to do that here because I want to leave that up to you. But I want to leave you with another tip, because if you want this to run properly, there's a couple things you have to take into account. All right, so let's check something out really quick. Okay, if we want to print a quotation mark, for example, the computer does not know that we mean an actual quotation mark to be printed to the screen. It thinks, oh, you're asking me like to put some more words in between it. It expects words to be in between quotation marks. It doesn't expect a quotation mark. But there's a little trick to this, the \. This, just like before with the \n, this tells the computer, hey, special thing going on. Hey, print a quotation mark. Okay? And if we go ahead and run this, just for example, you could see that a quotation mark is printed right there. Perfect. So for you, all I want you to do is print out a little bit of ASCII art. Try writing out your name. You don't have to go to some website and copy this. I'm sure you guys are very capable of figuring this out yourself. You could use all sorts of symbols on your keyboard. There's some like straight lines and stuff. There's backslashes. There's all sorts of cool little characters you could use in order to spell out your name. So go ahead, try spelling out your name. If you think it looks really cool, leave a comment with the ASCII art and I'll tell you your art looks cool. All right. So yeah, that's all I'm going to leave you off here with. Yeah, make sure the program runs. Make sure all the characters come out the right way. And yeah, good luck, guys. See you in the next one.